Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Past the Noise, the open forum discussion area where we just have a discussion about a wide range of topics from all sorts of perspectives, whether it be cultural, political, spiritual, social, whatever the case may be. We're going to discuss it. If you have had a chance to check out any of our first six episodes, you'll see it's a diverse topics, everything from CRT to gun violence to hip hop music. So we're covering a wide gamut of issues, not afraid to take on any issue, and just to have a discussion about it. And we hope that tonight you'll join us. You'll join in on the conversation. I'll be putting a call-in link in the description from time to time or in the comments from time to time. You can call in and let your feelings be known about the topic. You can make comments, ask questions, whatever the case may be. So we look forward to having your input. And welcome to the show. We're glad that you had decided to stop by this evening. I'm your host or co-host, Elder Michael Hightower, joined as always by Apostle T.B. Walker. Apostle, how you doing?
Everybody. Awesome. Hi, everybody.
Good. So tonight's topic is immigration. It's a wide topic. I mean, there's so many different ways we could go with the discussion of immigration, and we're just really.
I don't want to, you know what? I wanted, before we even get into our discussion in terms of immigration, I wanted to start out with something that I don't know how many people really heard about it, but I wanted to really just interrupt for just a moment to kind of go into, what's going on with the controversy out there with the Church Girl, the song by Beyonce that's out on her new Renaissance album. Don't know how many people really, I see it all over Facebook. I see it all over Twitter, and I've seen a lot of comments on YouTube. So I wanted to really discuss that with you for just a moment before we get into our topic. And I didn't know what your thinking was about that. One of the things that I looked at, I saw a lot of the discussion. I saw a lot of prophets and ministers kind of coming out of the woodworks, specifically a specific bishop who was coming out and was talking about Beyonce and the sacrilege, in terms of, that's one of the words he used, that she was speaking sacrilege. And, not to make fun of it, but, I think that one of the things that get missed here is that one of the biggest tricks of the enemy, and I think one of the things that the enemy's been really working hard on, and I think, this is it, Satan, has been really working to rebrand the church in the last 25 years, whether it's through scandal, using social media, has been really trying to brand the church as this big judgmental place, this place that is not welcoming at all, that, is probably part of the problem, in America. And I think that one of the tricks of the enemy by going out and having the bishop and so many other ministers attack Beyonce, they actually fell right into the trap that I think the enemy set by something that was not something outside of her catalog anyway. It wasn't like she was the head of the usher board and decided, that she was going to jump ship. If you look at her catalog, she's been doing this for a long time. So the reality is, by jumping out there, making the judgment, she's going to hell, and I think things of that nature, that she sold her soul to the devil. I think it fed right into the hands, and we kind of jumped right into the trap. This was the cheese that I think we bit, that many ministers bit on, and Christians alike, and then jumped in and became the judgment that the song was actually talking about. Don't judge me. The church is not supposed to be a place where that kind of, especially eternal judgment, is done. And I think that was a trap that we felt that many ministers fell into. And I think the other part is that Beyonce's in her lane. She didn't go outside of her lane. But I think if there was anybody who may have gone outside of their lane, it might have been the Clark sisters, right? In allowing this to happen. And I didn't hear the same backlash against Twinkie, and against Dorinda. I didn't hear the same backlash. And I think that might also be a part of looking at this, that we're kind of, people were beating up Beyonce, who's been the Beyonce that she was on Renaissance, that she was on Single Ladies and all the other albums, everything else she put out. She's doing what she's been doing. It's Twinkie and Dorinda that was stepping over the line and may have been in a greater place of compromise, that I'm wondering why there is no discussion there. So, I didn't know what your thinking was there, but I'd be interested in hearing what you have to say. And maybe even, other people who are listening to this right now might have some comment or some commentary on this as well. So I wasn't sure what your thinking was there.
There is so much there to unpack that it probably needs its own separate full
Sure.
length pass the noise thing. The first thing I heard, and the song is vulgar.
Right.
It's what it is. But when I heard it, I was like, but isn't this just a typical Beyonce song? How is this different than any other of
Right.
her other songs? I mean, it's the same female empowerment. You can't tell me what to do with my body. I'm gonna shake it if I want to, and da da da. And I have control of my own sexual, being, and I can do what I want. Nobody's going to
Right.
judge me. Tell me what to do. That was just keeping with the themes that she's been around for like 20 years, baby.
Right.
It's the same themes. The themes are not different. Now, I happen to look at some of the other songs on that same album. Listen, some of this stuff is straight demonic, but I'm not sure it's any more or less demonic than her other stuff.
Right.
But because someone is involved in something that we say, look, that's demonic. That's not Christian, obviously, doesn't mean we pronounce that they're going to hell. I mean, that
Right.
is well above our pay grade in every sense of the word. We don't
That's right.
have the authority to either save someone from hell or send them to hell. And she's not going to hell because she penned a vulgar song, or she say should have dressed. That's not why. If she's going, I'm not saying I don't know her, so I don't know. She could be saved.
Right.
But if she is not saved, she's not going to hell because she's, the video. She's going to hell because she just refused to accept Jesus Christ as their personal Savior.
Right.
That's the only thing. The rest of it is just sort of like got people angry because the church, the church girl in the title, and she's referencing church girls sort of going out during the week and doing their thing and then showing up at church and acting a different way. Which, hey, I mean, it has happened. It's not like she's way out of left field. Like, I don't know what she's talking about.
Right.
Like, there's some people doing that.
She didn't create that, but she didn't create that idea that that's what's happening. That has been happening for a while. And that might, I honestly look at this, and I really look at this and I say, listen, some of that lifestyle and compromise and the way that we just kind of accepted that, because comedians have done that, have talked about that for years.
Sure.
Those sermons have been preached about that church girl forever. That's always been there. And I think that, whenever these things happen, I think it's a place where we have to kind of look and take accountability as opposed to move directly into the blame game. Hey, Beyonce, you shouldn't have said that because you convinced girls to go out and shake it on Saturday and come back and do the Lord's work on Sunday. Well, Beyonce is not old enough to have created that. She didn't start that. That's been happening for a long time. And if that resonates, that needs to be what's dealt with. That real, true, committed believers need to actually take stock in their lives. And there are some that are out there doing that might need to take stock. But I don't think we can beat Beyonce up to say, "Hey, look what you just did! You convinced a whole generation of girls to go to the club on Saturday." Not true. Not true.
No. And like I said, there's in the song itself, and again in some of the other songs on the album, there's a lot to unpack in terms of, because she has a lot of influence. I mean, she's got
sure.
So she has a huge influence over youth and people who listen to pop music and whatnot. And so that all that would have to be sort of addressed. But my sense is Beyonce sees herself as a church girl. Like, I do what I want Monday through Saturday, and then I go to church on Sunday. So I think she's sort of in that same vein herself in her own mind.
Sure.
Which is that's how she sees herself. That's how she sees it. But again,
it's the judgment.
Way over the line with she's going to hell and things of that nature. First of all, we shouldn't want that for anybody. I don't care what they're doing.
Right.
We should not she's going. That to me does not display the love of Christ. Like,
right. Absolutely.
Like, we should be like, how can we get her saved? How can we get the gospel? How can we, if she's out of order, she is. How can we get corrected? How can we get that corrected? Not, but she's gone. So just bye. I mean, last time I checked, I didn't see anything in the news. She's still alive.
She's still here. That's right.
If she is not saved, she still has a chance to be saved. So
right.
That should be our attitude.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And I know that wasn't our topic, but I just really kind of felt like we really needed to address that before we got into what our topic is, which is immigration tonight. So I appreciate that.
No, it was needful. Like I said, we may end up doing a full length thing on that. We dealt with music before, but this is sort of a little different. just in the way she came out, and the fact that she sort of indirectly, directly involved the church when she when she called it church girl and she sampled, Twinkie Clark lyrics. She sort of brought the church into it, but the response didn't have to be what it was. So it's still two different things.
And I wonder if there needed to be a response to a song that the church, or at least the Church of God in Christ, viewed as completely secular. When you look at, the idea that, listen, you brought the church into it, so I need to address it. But what about the murder, murder, kill, kill song, that had gone out? I mean, if you don't say church, then we don't need to talk about it. No, there's so much that's there. And I think that was just a bait that the enemy used to pull people away from the real focus, which is salvation, getting people saved, to now judging people's salvation and declaring people unsaved. That was just a trick of the enemy that I think we have to kind of wake up and not get pulled into discussions that, are idle. And that, when you look at these idle discussions that we avoid, we avoid things that really are serious that we need to talk about. And we jump into things that are just like pop culture, because nothing changes there. Beyonce is probably still going to get a Grammy next year. Nothing's going to change. The Beehive is probably going to grow. And, and she's not worried one bit about what the bishop is saying. But there are people that were out in front of him, I'm sure, that needed Christ, that probably got much more of a rant about Beyonce and, hitting the hands of Twinkie Clark versus, listen, here's what you need to do to get saved. And I think that's a hijacking of a moment that the enemy was in some way successful.
Yeah, I agree. We actually had people commenting as we were talking about that. We had, let's see, Sean Fader said, "You just said it. Are we upset because we see the truth being put out there for all to see? It's our dirty laundry being aired."
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
And listen, you know what? Here's the thing. When you look at, we look at overall the sovereignty of God, I simply believe that in some ways, because we won't say it, because we won't deal with it, God will use, the same donkey. I like the idea that he would use a donkey, in Numbers. I don't know why we wouldn't think he would use a Beyonce in 2022 to be able to say, listen, I'm going to use you as a reproach to talk about this compromise that we've known about, that we preached about. I probably preached that sermon myself, that, about this very same issue of compromise. And if we won't do it, then the world is going to be used to rise up in judgment and say, this is how you guys have really been acting. This is who you really have been. This is 2022. And we're in a real serious time of upheaval. And every area of our lives, we're going to see upheaval, which is going to just unearth things so we can really examine what's been covered, so we can really see what needs to be fixed. I think that's a good comment.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have look at one more comment, and then we'll go into
awesome
immigration. So we have a ton of church girls / women, men and boys living one way on Sunday and another way the rest of the week. She exposed exactly what has happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
It does happen. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
we absolutely. We know that's been happening. And maybe the sermon is not Beyonce shut up. Maybe the sermon might be, hey, listen, church girls, we need to really get this together, because this isn't the way you're supposed to be. Beyonce told it as it is. Yeah. We can still tell it how it's supposed to be.
Right. And that's what we should be doing. Absolutely.
That's what we should be doing.
Cool. All right. Now, I think we're going to come back to that at some point. Maybe next week. Looking forward to it. But tonight we're talking about immigration and why immigration? Why should we bother with this topic? Why is it important? Immigration into this country, and actually globally, has far-reaching implications and ramifications, whether those be financial or political or cultural, societal. And even if you think that it's not affecting you directly, there's a lot of things that are happening. If you're watching the news, you saw where the governor of Texas is sending illegal immigrants to sanctuary cities in DC and New York City. So those places are now being directly affected by illegal immigration. So we're seeing it all over the globe, really, issues with immigration. And so we just thought that this would be a good topic to tackle tonight and sort of really get down into some issues that you're not going to see on the news, because really it's become so politicized. It's either you're all for it or you're all against it, or every immigrant's a criminal or they're all angels. I mean, It's just too polarized. And so we're not here to polarize it or politicize it. We just want to get to some of the issues that are underneath um, the immigration issue. I mean, if you watch the news, you see that the media focuses almost exclusively on illegal immigration. So if you took a microphone and went to anywhere from Maine to California, everywhere in between, and said to somebody, "What do you think about the immigration issue?" They would immediately think of illegal immigration. They wouldn't
Right.
think about the millions of people who come here every year legally from all over the world. Their mind would immediately turn to illegal immigration because that is where the media and therefore people focus on. And I think that that's whether it's liberal or conservative, because they all have their different things, but they've used it to sort of rally their bases and generate votes, but without really dealing with the issues at hand and taking care of people, quite frankly.
Now, when you say when you say taking care of people, now you talk about taking care of the legal immigrants, or are you saying that in part in that is also in taking care of the illegal immigration? Because I mean, do we have a problem with legal immigration in this country, or is our real issue with illegal immigrants?
Well, I don't know if we have a problem. Like for instance, if you remember about a year or so ago, there was a huge influx of Haitian immigrants
Yes.
fleeing Haiti for humanitarian reasons. The country's
Right.
on fire, and they were sent back to Haiti forcefully by the tens of thousands.
Right.
U.S. is now accepting hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian immigrants, refugees, under similar circumstances. But they're not having any problems getting in. In fact, Joe Biden went to Poland to meet with to be among the Ukrainian refugees. But you hardly hear anything now about the Haitian refugees who are still coming here, still trying to get into the country. But when
Right.
they catch them, they send them back to Haiti. They call it re-expatriating them, some
Right.
fancy name for sending your butt back to wherever you came from. That's all.
Right.
That's all it really is. And so, in that sense, when you have a politicized immigration policy, then the people are secondary to whatever your ideology is.
I agree. Okay. Yeah, I totally agree with that because I mean, I suspect that that is partially about race, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's about race. I mean, I think that you look at our immigration policy period, that I think that race has a lot to do with it. You know,
Hmm.
I don't know if we have the same issue on our northern border with Canada, as we do with Mexico. We don't have that same issue, and I suspect that we didn't have the issue until our borders were really, really. I mean, were exposed to be as porous as they are. And I
Hmm.
think that the reality is that there is something about Haitians being turned away and Ukrainians being welcomed in that it can't be war because immigrants from the Congo
Hmm.
have the same issue. Those
Right.
those blank hole countries that, as Trump called them,
Hmm.
had a
Yeah.
hard time getting. Well, they were turned away. So I
Hmm.
suspect that that's connected to how we view immigrants and the type of
Hmm.
immigrants that are accepted in America and the type that aren't. There's a face of immigration that I
Hmm.
think that is really, really hard to fight here. That's based upon racism.
Yeah, I think there's a thing in people's minds when they think about immigrants, and they think about the people that they want to see come and get integrated into the country.
Yes.
So Ukrainians, Eastern European, we know what Ukrainians look like. Yeah, we'll take them. They'll integrate right in. But Haitians, I don't know about them. They're a different breed. We're not as comfortable with them because there's no other reason. There's no other real legal reason. There's no other
Right.
reason that makes any sense why you would accept one and not the other than
Absolutely.
there's a racial component to it for sure. And I think there's a racial component throughout all of our immigration policies, whether you're talking about legal or illegal. I think there's racist elements to that, even down to the reasons why people think that we need more immigration, are based on race. Um, that's so to your point, because we're talking about you mentioned the southern border versus the northern border.
Right.
So it's a big difference, right? So the southern border is where Mexican and people from South America come or try to come to the country. And let's take a look at this clip, and we can sort of discuss discuss.
Let's move on to the subject of immigration. Mr. Trump, you want to build a wall. Secretary Clinton, you have offered no specific plan for how you want to secure our southern border. Mr. Trump, you are calling for major deportations. Secretary Clinton, you say that within your first 100 days as president, you're going to offer a package that includes a pathway to citizenship. Mr. Trump, you go first in this segment. You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, she wants to give amnesty, which is a disaster and very unfair to all of the people that are waiting in line for many, many years. We need strong borders. In the audience tonight, we have 4 mothers of, I mean, these are unbelievable people that I've gotten to know over a period of years whose children have been killed, brutally killed by people that came into the country illegally. You have thousands of mothers and fathers and relatives all over the country. They're coming in illegally. Drugs are pouring in through the border. We have no country if we have no border. Hillary wants to give amnesty. She wants to have open borders. The border secure, as you know, the Border Patrol agents, 16,500 plus ICE last week endorsed me. First time they've ever endorsed a candidate. It means their job is tougher.
I agree that if you don't have borders, you don't have a country. Like the borders have to be enforced. You have laws regarding these things, and they have to be enforced. Otherwise, you really don't have a country. Now, because he says all kinds of crazy, like he'll make a good point. This is just Trump, and he'll say nonsense on the other end. So he has a good point, but then he sandwiches between a scare tactic, which is they're coming here to murder people. Yes, some of them are criminals, but that's not the overwhelming. I mean, the overwhelming 90-something plus percent really are trying to escape and get to a better life.
Right.
But he uses that as a scare tactic for his base, and it just again, I agree with him on the whole though, because I do believe that if you don't have borders that are controlled, you don't have a country. And amnesty, I agree, amnesty is a disaster.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, when you think about what's there, I get where people are afraid and the idea of losing the country. I think that's one of the things that people are afraid of losing the country. And it's like, I think that a lot of people, when you hear the idea of losing America, a lot of people think of that being, losing the whiteness of America, losing the old traditions of America. But listen, without border control, we are going to move into anarchy, whether we know it, whether we, want to look away and hope that it won't happen. Because there's a part of this that within that group, you are going to have the huge amounts of human trafficking that is opened up by these porous borders. There are going to be the corridors where they're just open air drug markets because without border control, you can't do really good drug enforcement and border enforcement all at the same time. They really don't work together without, some type of control, which could be that big beautiful wall that Trump was talking about. That big beautiful wall that he's gonna get the Mexicans to pay for. That has not happened up to this point. But there's got to be some security. I think that the liberal view of this is going to be the ruination of the country.
Yeah, I mean, you can't. I mean, it's fine to have compassion with regard to people who are trying to come here, but just allowing a free for all is very dangerous. But on some level, I don't think it's a free for all. I think that this is the government kind of knows what they're doing, and sort of they're fine with a certain number of illegal immigrants coming to the country because they represent cheap labor, a way to hold down wages across the board. And quite frankly, I don't think that they're that exercised about it. I think it's something that they sort of accept as something that is good. Like the ends justify the means. Them being here and contributing to American society somehow justifies them being here illegally, which I completely disagree with.
I totally disagree. Now you're saying you think the government is good with that?
I think.
When I say the government, I guess I'm looking and saying you're saying the Biden administration is fine with that, or you think that's been government policy all along? Because I think that the playing field has somewhat changed.
I think that's been The playing field has changed, but I think that, I mean, under Trump, definitely the borders were tighter and they had more rules and stuff. But I think the government, certainly now, and with other we're talking about, you certainly have sort of a open borders mentality. I mean, Hillary Clinton certainly was going to be open for open borders. Joe Biden certainly is for open borders. I think this government, to be specific, this government is fine with a amount of illegal immigration that goes unchecked.
Yeah, now I agree with that, and I think that's kind of part of the problem and where we really are, in that we're looking at this government, which is kind of some ways a throwback to Clinton, Obama. The same type of mentality. We didn't have any change in the immigration policy really. Much more liberal, even with Obama. But I think with Trump, and as much as I hate to be in agreement with Trump, I think that that's another mindset that's also in America. That I think that there is the border mindset that Biden, has. That listen, there's a certain portion of this that's great, but I think that there is a new mindset that has been developed under Trump that is really dealing with the idea of stricter borders. And I think that's maybe a divide in this country, but I don't think that's going to stay, because I think that with the things that are coming with these porous borders, America is going to see that we just can't have sanctuary cities. We just can't have immigrants who can just get here. If you just get here, you'll be numbered and then released.
Mm-hmm.
There's just no way that can work. And I mean, if that works that way, that should work that way in every other area of American society. Listen, I mean, I promise I'll be in court. So I don't need a bail, right? So I mean, like, why does a person get a bail here who lives here? Why aren't we trusted? Why don't you just write your own recognizance and just get out of jail if you do something illegal? But we have people who are like, we know what they've done is illegal to get here, and yet it's just like, well, you put your foot on American soil, so we're going to just trust you, and we're going to trust that here's a date, and I'm sure you'll be back. We don't do that with anyone else in America. Why in the world we do this with illegal immigrants? That to me makes no sense. With someone who's done something illegal,
right,
to get in front of you in the first place.
This is the reason. This is the reason right here.
Other things that I'm worried about, which are quite frankly the disincentives to work. And I think, smart economies in the next decade will liberalize their immigration policies and bring more workers on board. It's a global problem, and that's what economies need for growth.
Interestingly enough, when I spent time in Washington over a decade ago, this is what we were talking about on a daily basis, is the need for more of these visas to get people who want to work, and who can do the jobs into the United States. Do you see the Biden administration as one that you can work with in moving forward with that? I mean, at the end of the day, this is a pro-immigration president, no?
Well, I think you're right, but the actions have been quite limited. And I don't expect anything to change significantly in the near term. But I think the signals are quite clear that if we want to get economic growth back in the neighborhood of 3%, we can only do that through a more liberal immigration policy. And of course, that's really what got America to where we are today, at least if you take a 100-year view.
That's the reason. It's economic. And that's the reason why this government doesn't really want to touch it in the way that they should touch it. Because he just says, if we want to get to a certain amount of growth, as if that's like the end all be all, we need more immigrants.
Right.
But, okay, so we put all this money, time, and effort into immigrants, but isn't like a large part of your workforce in prison? Like, don't we just lock people up just willy-nilly? So if you put that money into communities and neighborhoods and education here, wouldn't you have your workforce? The need for the workforce is driven by the fact that you have like mass incarceration and all these young men in prison, and then you complain about, well, we don't have enough workers. Well, no, I mean, but there's no law that says you have to have 3% growth. I mean, that's a strictly economic way of looking at this issue with people. That's why I said the government not really worrying about the people. They're worried about, well, we got to have a certain amount of economic growth. I promise you, if a young, and I'm not advocating for just letting people out in prison. I mean, people who are incarcerated, that's fine. I mean, the certain amount of punishment is fine, but our system is lock them up and forget about them. Lock them up, with the key, lock them up. When they get out and do the same thing again, we're like, what? He's back again?
Right.
What did you expect he's going to do? Yes, he's back again. The whole thing, though, is if a young man, let's say a young man who from Baltimore, convicted of a recreational amount of marijuana, gets a year or so in prison, gets out. If he got out and burned all of his documents, went over to Mexico and came back, he'd get more services and more resources than he would staying in Baltimore.
Absolutely, because he is, if he did that and was able to burn his documents, we'd be able to pay him less. See, I think the thing about I think the problem with inmates coming out is that they are still American, right? So they're still going to get, they've got to get minimum wage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the problem is that it's sneaky with, which is one of the things that I was making the distinction between this particular administration and the other administration, is that I think it's about that money. I think the reality is they would never think of it in that way, because the other person from this Central America can still be paid under the table much less than a person in America that, even if coming out of prison, still are subject to certain rights. It tells you a lot about the country and about our immigration policy, and how, as you said, the economy, the economics really, really is keeping us from being able to do what we really need to do to secure the country. It's a homeland security issue that's being treated like an IRS issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Listen, we have a caller.
Okay.
Let's see. We have Sean Feta. Sean Feta, welcome to Pass the Noise.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So this is an interesting issue, because the first thing I started thinking about when you all were talking was exactly where you went, was the economics. But I was also thinking to myself how unsustainable it is for us to continue to subsidize and support illegal immigrants. There was a huge hoopla a while ago when they were talking about subsidizing the education for illegal immigrants, when, and anyone who knows me knows that all the student loan debt that we get, and they're unwilling to unload that off of us, and yet you're willing to just throw money at someone who's not even a citizen of this country. It's just very, very interesting that we have all of this additional money to blow on people who haven't spent time in this country and done all the things you need to do to become a citizen. Why do we do it? And then the other thing I wanted to see if you all were going to address doing this was, how does our immigration policy compare to that of other countries? Because it's my sense that other countries are a lot more stringent when it comes to who they will let in and how long they can stay in the country. And we seem to be a little bit more flexible than others. So I'd love your thoughts on that.
Other countries are struggling with the same issues, especially UK, Germany. They have the same issue because they want the same thing economically that the United States is going for, which is low skilled workers who make below minimum wage. You can do whatever you want with them. It drives your economics because you're not paying them a lot. They're having the same issue there that we're having here. In fact, I have a clip, we may get to it, but in one of these clips, the young man makes the point that when you have large numbers of immigrants into your country, and you pit them against the people who are already there and pretend like, well, the immigrants are taking jobs from people in Dublin or wherever, or the immigrants are doing this and immigrants are doing that. What you're doing is you're forcing those two groups to battle each other for nothing. Because the whole reason why you have all these immigrants is to hold down everyone's wages. And so the people who are unemployed or just can't get a higher paying job, but maybe because of their education, they're stuck in the same boat that people in this country are stuck in, which is because these wages are being artificially held low. They can never get out of that level, out of that poverty level, because the system isn't designed to let them up. If you need to consistently bring in low wage workers, what that tells you is that you're just making a whole bunch of more. Either you're making a bunch of low wage jobs, or you're making jobs that were maybe higher wage. You're making them lower wage based on who you can hire and who you can bring into the country.
Yeah, and I think that, to your point concerning You know, you mentioned the student loans. Listen, I think that this is going to be, as I mentioned earlier, 2022 and on. I think we are in a referendum time. I think that we're at a place where we're having to really review everything that we've thought, what it is to be conservative, what is it to be liberal, and the idea of being able to find money to educate people who have come here illegally, to be able to find money to educate children who are here illegally. I think that the idea of compassion and reality have to come. I think there's a real coming to Jesus moment that America's really having concerning its willingness to just be a breadbasket to some, but a shut door to others. And that door that's being shut is being shut to Americans more and more. And the red carpet in some ways being laid out. Now, we know that that's not being laid out to all immigrants, but when you look at the red carpet that's being laid out to some, that's still a slap in the face to the no carpet, to the, that's been given to Americans who could use the very same weights lifted off of them that we're looking to lift off of the rest of the world. I think America's changed. I think what we are and who we are has changed. And this idea of, give us your poor, and give us your tired. And I think that the idea, okay, that was great at a point. Now we can't do that anymore. And the idea that like we used to do it and all the donuts are free and now they're not, that's just life, right? I mean, that's kind of how things work. We used to give away a free donut with every new carburetor. Well, now we can't afford to do that. So you know what businesses do? They stop giving away free donuts. They still do the best job they can on the carburetors, but they don't give away free donuts. We might need to be we may be in a place right now where the free donuts are over. I don't know if that's helped at all, Sean.
No, it does help. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking about the comment that you made at the beginning about Ukraine and the Ukrainians coming in and the Haitians. And I will tell you, it pisses me off to hear that. It just honestly does. Because the idea that two groups coming from war-torn areas who are desperately in need of some kind of asylum, one gets turned back and says, go back. And also it's at their own risk. Some of them don't even make it back alive. And then others are welcomed with open arms and we're going to give you everything we have to make your life better. Who's addressing that? Like, has that been pulled to the top of discussion amongst those that are anti or pro immigration? I would love to know if people are looking at the racism that is underneath some of the decision making about who comes in and who's forced back home into horrible situations.
We're in our do-gooder moment right now, and it's what's killing us and dragging us down. It's not until the do-gooder tie, gets choked around our neck. I was looking at a place called Soft White Underbelly. It was just it's a site on YouTube, and there are interviews. And interestingly enough, today there was an interview with two Ukrainian refugees. They were two young girls, and they were just talking about the war and the number of days they had been in the country, like 30 days. But, and at the time they were saying, it's been a month already and we need some help. And they were talking about living in Kyiv and all those things, but it was a month. So from looking at that time, because this was an older interview, 30 days from the time that they left there, they're in America. They were doing an interview in LA, in America. And so how it was easy for these Ukrainian girls to leave this war zone and to talk 30 days, like the war is still fresh. It's not a year old. 30 days and they were in America, and yet Haitians who were leaving earthquakes, who were also leaving what were practically civil war, were repatriated. So are we talking about it? This is a time. This is what we're trying to do, to bring this idea that this isn't right. There's something wrong here. And every area that we look at, whether it is the immigration, wherever area in the government that we look at, we're going to find out that the truth of the matter is that our liberal policies are not what we think they are. And we've got to really go back and look at what we think is really a nice policy that really has a lot of teeth in it, that is also clawing against a lot of people and welcoming a certain group of people.
Thanks for your response. Yeah. I really appreciate it. And I would ask also if you can, at some point, maybe after this is over, if there's something that we can do to bring attention to that issue and to make people more aware. Let us know where there's a place we can write in or like what we can do, because I think it's great to talk about this intellectually, but if there's something we can do to actually turn the tide on this, I would love to be able to do that. So thanks again. The very interesting show.
Before you go, I want to get your take on this. If you can see it, I'm gonna get your take on this video I'm about to play.
Okay.
To me, words matter because facts matter. Isn't it incredible that in this election year, in which immigration has been a central issue, there are defining facts that we just really kind of don't hear about? Did you know that undocumented workers like me have actually paid about $100 billion into the Social Security Fund in the past decade? You know who the source of the information here is? The Social Security Administration itself. It's a primary source. According to the chief actuary of the Social Security Administration, an estimated 7 million people who are here illegally using fake Social Security numbers have paid about $12 million to the Social Security Fund every year. $12 billion. I personally have paid about $130,000 according to the Social Security Administration, and guess what? We don't get it back. But I'm happy to pay for it. I'm glad for the public schools. I'm glad for the roads. I'm glad for the public system and infrastructure. I don't know where I would be without public libraries. I'm happy for all of that. But while we pay these taxes and Social Security, can you at least not talk about us like we're some sort of criminals and illegals? As if your livelihood actually is not connected to ours?
Wow. Wow. I don't think many of us know that.
So a couple of lots of interesting things there. I mean, the first is, and he's not the only one who does this, sort of justifying them being here by saying, but we contribute, we pay taxes, we do this, we do that, we do that. But that doesn't justify them being here illegally. That's a false argument. I mean, if you broke and entered into a restaurant and did all the prep work and cleaned the bathrooms, and they came the next day and say, you know what, I'm here, so I need a job. I mean, you don't get to just, I'm an undocumented worker, so now I need to be on the payroll. That wouldn't work like that. You'd be taken away in cuffs. And so the idea that their contributions mitigate the fact that they're here illegally, it does not. But the more interesting thing he said was that using fake Social Security numbers, that means illegal immigration creates underground criminal enterprises. Millions of fake Social Security numbers.
Right.
So I'm guessing that these same people are also stealing people's identities, because if you can make fake Social Security numbers that the IRS accepts the money through them, it's outrageous to me.
Yeah, I mean that's extremely outrageous. I mean, and when you look at it, I mean, if these are documents that the IRS accepts, right, then you also get benefits at the end, right? People who may have been paying into this for 20 years also get Social Security benefits, right? So, I mean, in the end of the day, you have a real serious cycle of illegality that starts with illegality and will end with illegally. I don't know how it can be I'm not sure how we can actually justify it by simply saying, hey, here's the amount of money. See, I mean, I think in the end of the day, that's what's really driving everything, is that we are, one says it's cheap labor. The other one says, look how much we're paying, even though we're faking it till we make it. This is how much we're putting into the system. And greed runs this whole thing.
I think you all nailed it. I think you absolutely nailed it. I'm sitting here saying, I had no idea that when you said you were going to talk about immigration, this kind of information was going to be brought to the forefront. And the fact that, like, you nailed it. The fact that there's illegal, activity that's undergirding every single piece of this. I mean, it was absolutely hilarious that he said that these are fake Social Security cards. and yet, they're paying into, Social Security using that. So yeah, there's a lot here. There's an awful lot here that you all are unearthing. And I think we just got to figure out, like, what's next? What's the next step? And what's the best? I would love for you all, as you get closer to concluding, like, what's a solution for this? Like, what's next from you all's opinion? And thanks again. I'm going to jump off.
All right. Thanks for calling. We have a comment from Keisha, Evangelist Keisha Gibson. The fact remains that many of these illegal immigrants are doing jobs that some Americans are not doing or will not do. Agriculture, food service, home improvement, landscaping. Fact. Many farmers need these workers. They ask for work visas for workers.
You know what? I mean, I think that as you look at it, says, you know, the fact remains that many of these illegal immigrants are doing jobs that some Americans are not doing. Okay. So, you know, if you take a look at that, we do have legal immigration in America, people who are coming from the same place. You know, you tell me a guy, you know, who comes from Juarez, and, you know, who's coming here legally in the same situation with his neighbor coming from Juarez. This same guy is willing to do the same job, you know, coming into America. He's willing to do the same job, the same agricultural job. He needs the same help, and he's willing to come in and jump in and do that same job. I don't think it's been proven here that, you know, legal immigrants won't do the same job as illegals. We've kind of compared illegals to Americans, you know, as if that's the comparison. But the truth, the comparison is to the people who are coming across the border. And there are many Mexicans, people from Guatemala, Central America, all over, that are willing to do the same jobs legally that these farmers need. Of course, illegal immigration is going to be, you know, financially, it's going to be much more lucrative because an underground economy is going to be much cheaper. But what we'd have to do is we'd have to look at this and say, yes, it's better to have an illegal underground economy in the country than to have a system of legal workers. And I don't think the idea that Americans will not do these jobs doesn't stop other people from other countries from doing these same jobs. And it doesn't, we don't have, I don't think we have numbers of willingness that, like, Mexicans who come over here willingly, or people from Central America who come here willingly, will not work in these farms. I think they will, but we've established an underground economy that makes it easier to do it illegally than to do it legally.
No, first of all, thank you for your comment.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
You know, it's a good. I mean, listen, we're here to have a discussion. We're not here to just, you know, amen each other. So certainly, thank you for the kind of little pushback there, which is good. I want to play this clip, and then Akeisha, if you're still listening, if you want to jump on, if you want to make another comment, that would be great. I want you to listen. This is it from a clip from a guy in Britain.
The first is the inevitable argument that the reason why we need mass immigration and have needed it is because there are jobs that British people will not do, and we need to import people to do those jobs. Let me say to you as frankly as it is possible to say, that is one of the most racist arguments you can hear. It suggests that there are jobs which British people not only don't want to do, but shouldn't do, don't have to do. We don't have to even encourage them to do. Please, you've had your go. We don't even need to encourage them to do. But we will go around the rest of the world and hoover up people who are willing to work for nothing because it provides us with cheap nannies and cheap waiters in restaurants and so on. I think it's a lamentable argument. The second argument you can hear, and we had it already tonight, is the argument about the hoovering up, as I would put it, of the other end, as it were, of the economic spectrum, that it is the best idea possible that we will travel around the world and hoover up nurses and doctors in Africa and across other regions of the world, that we can take people from the third world who the third world has superbly educated and make sure they benefit us. Again, I think a lamentable argument. Look, the argument on immigration often comes down to net benefits. Is it an economic net benefit or an economic problem? You can, incidentally, on the material on this, find pretty much a 50-50 divide. About 50% of the studies say that there's a huge impact positively for the country. About the other 50% say the opposite.
Yeah, you can see it's not an American issue. It's not an American thing, the need for workers or how you get the workers or immigration, illegal immigration, other immigrants. But I think his overall point I loved, which was that who are we to go around the world and take workers from other countries? I mean, at either end of the spectrum, like if we take all their doctors, lawyers, and engineers, what are they going to be left with? And we're going to complain that that's a third world country. That's like you said,
right,
a blank hole country. Well, you took all their resources in terms of their people and their workers. And it goes to the lower end too. Like, don't these countries need their own workers? Don't they need their own labor forces? Why are we entitled to other people's labor forces to enrich ourselves. I think his points were well taken.
And the cheap labor, the idea that, America, okay, so why not encourage Americans to get back to doing these jobs? I mean, if these jobs need to be done, if they actually need to be done, what are we saying about it? Where we would encourage illegal workers to come and do a job that is just like so low that we're creating not only an underclass, but an underclass, because we already have an underclass in this country. This just establishes now a class even under them that we sustain for our own good, but they never can get out of that class.
Yeah, I think to your earlier point and to Keisha's point, there's a difference between won't do and won't do for X number of dollars.
Right.
So they're sort of like, I'll do that if you pay me right, but I'm not going to do it if it's just going to be like nothing. So I think you sort of have that tug too, that Americans may look at some jobs and say, I'm not doing that job for that. But a person who is an illegal immigrant, they'll do it for nothing because why not? But they don't have anything else, going on. So they'll do it. So you do have that push and pull too, where I think there are jobs that Americans would say, nah, that I'm good.
I'm good at that rate.
Yeah, at that rate.
At that rate.
Yeah.
So what does that say about the farmer then? I mean, what does that say about the farmer who doesn't want to pay minimum wage? We're not saying he can't pay it, right? We're just kind of saying, hey, we've been doing this at $3 an hour, and that's how we make our profit. That doesn't necessarily justify. That doesn't mean, oh, well, cheaper labor. That was kind of how you justified slavery, right? That's what, right. That was a war. Hey, we can't let go of slavery. That's what who's gonna tend this cotton? That's why they fought the Civil War, right? With that same argument that this is how we've been doing this forever. We've owned them forever. How are we going to keep the South rolling without slavery? Well, how about we see what happens? Pay wage, and you get out there, you can do some work too, and this is how it works. Well, we could probably do the same thing. We've just been really doing some indentured servitude with a little bit of payment here for the longest time, and that might need to change.
Yeah. And that's going to be hard. That's going to be a hard change. That's going to be
absolutely.
A change.
That's major.
That's going to take some doing, and really, that's going to take.
It's going to be a total change. But isn't that what happened with the South, right?
Yeah. Well,
it required an economic change, and people were willing to take up arms over that particular change because it was economic as well. They couldn't imagine how we would keep cotton going. How you going to? We can imagine farming without slaves, right? They couldn't imagine. There's no way the pigs are going to grow and be eaten and slaughtered if we don't have slaves out here. Aren't we kind of using that same mentality that if we don't have illegals, how are we going to get asparagus out of the ground? Same way we do it, on the East Coast. With peaches, there's, well, here's the thing. Illegals are being used all over the country. And it's going to require the country to have a different way of thinking because that's illegals are working in all areas of our country, picking, peaches in Atlanta or mushrooms in Pennsylvania, all over the place. It's just really going to require us to be willing to change our thinking in the same way we had to change it when it came to slavery. Because I think it's really as serious as that.
Radical change.
Radical change.
Radical change is needed. We do not have a ton of time left. Let's jump quickly to sanctuary cities.
Okay.
Sanctuary cities, quite simply, are cities where they don't enforce immigration laws. They allow illegals to be in their cities and get IDs and all kinds of other stuff. But essentially, they're ignoring federal immigration laws. And you have cities all over the country. There's some in California. New York City is a sanctuary city. DC is a sanctuary city. And I think this is a good example of it seems like a good idea when it doesn't have a huge impact. Like it seems like, look how progressive we are. But in the end, this is what happens.
We are a sanctuary city. So what does it mean? What do people understand it to mean to be a sanctuary city? What it means most directly for people's safety is that the Metropolitan, our police department, MPD, is not an agent of the federal government. What it means is that our police are focused on protecting and serving DC residents without regard to their immigration status. So no Metropolitan Police Department officer is allowed to ask anybody what their immigration status is.
5 years later.
Can you update us on your efforts with the migrant buses that are coming from Texas and Arkansas that we see seemingly on an increasing basis down near Union Station?
Sure. So we are very focused, and we continue to be very focused on having the federal government do its part and take the lead in addressing what we see as a growing humanitarian crisis with people who are seeking asylum, coming across the country to get to their final destinations. And we're going to continue to pursue federal involvement.
No.
So you don't want to follow the federal laws, but you want the federal government to help you.
Right. Right.
That makes no sense. So and really, I mean, you're asking sort of for a form of anarchy where you don't enforce the law. So if someone comes across law enforcement and they know, they're going to know if you run their name or whatever, this person is here illegally, they can't do anything about it. Their hands are tied. They can write them a ticket. They can do whatever else, but you cannot do anything about their immigration status.
That's ridiculous. And I mean, I don't know what, I don't think that people, when these sanctuary cities were enacted and thought about this, I don't think they thought about the morale of the police officers. I don't think they thought, what this does to a police department that is told specifically, like, don't enforce the law. And now we get a chance to see what sanctuary cities are really all about. We got to get a chance to see a little taste of what this will lead to. We kind of had some of those in Seattle where, the police department kind of stepped back and just let them have, the city for a period of time. And it was absolutely outrageous. I'm not because I'm conservative and I'm not a bleeding liberal, but I just believe that if you take away law and order and start chipping away at that, you open the door to anarchy. And I think we saw that out west, and I think we're going to see some of that as we see some of the fallout of these people who are being taken to New York and DC and some of these sanctuary cities. I think they're going to find out that they don't like it.
Yeah, I have, and then these immigrants are coming from Texas. The Texas governor is putting them on buses and sending them to DC and New York City. I have absolutely no problem with it.
Right.
Because why should Texas, because they're on the southern border, why should they bear the brunt, the cost, and the expense and whatnot of all these illegal immigrants? Why should they have to do it by themselves? If you're a sanctuary city, which means that you welcome people here illegally, why don't you should welcome these busloads of people who are here illegally, who are being sent from other places. I mean, it's easy when you think, they can't get from Texas to DC, so it's not really going to be our problem. Now, the Texas governor is making it their problem.
Right.
And he sort of put the spotlight on it, and you would hope that at some point they would come to some kind of resolution about immigration policy, because now that you're getting a taste of what we're dealing with every day, maybe you'll say, maybe this isn't such a great idea. Maybe this isn't, sort of as progressive as we thought, to disobey laws and to just have a free-for-all with regard to immigration.
Absolutely. I agree with you. Listen, I think that's well said. I mean, I think the chickens have not come home to roost yet, but wait and see. I think they certainly will.
No, I think absolutely. I think to your point, you're starting to see it a little bit now, but this is just getting
tip of the iceberg.
And the fact that she's immediately asked for federal help just tells you that it's a huge issue, for that. But I mean that, and it wasn't that many people, but even you can see even numbers in the hundreds,
right,
overwhelm your system, your ability to find places for them to stay,
right,
to feed them, to somehow account for them in other ways, whether you're getting them, if you want to do that, some places give them IDs or some other way to identify them. No matter how you do it, it's going to place a burden on your city or on your jurisdiction just because of the sheer number of people coming all at once into your system. Like if all these people showed up at the DMV tomorrow, you'd be overwhelmed. I mean, period.
But what a slap in the face, what a slap in the face, man, for all the people who are on various lists, housing lists, food subsidy lists.
Yeah.
All these people that are DC residents, American citizens that have been waiting in line, and that somehow you're saying there's going to be a place for them, these people, right away, and they're going to get food like right away. And American citizens are on a list, and they're somehow 89, and they're they just got good news that they're 56 on the list, and someone from Mexico and Guatemala and El Salvador is somehow going to get housing, and it's going to be prioritized. That to me is anti-American.
And you forgot something. You forgot they're going to put their kids in schools.
Ah, that's right. That's right.
They're going to put their kids in schools. They're not the schools that these people have to send their kids to. You can put them in other schools.
Man, I can't. I would listen. I would love that. I hope that that's the American dream for all of us. But it's not.
It's sadly not, because the resources aren't there. The resources. I mean, everything's not money, right? You can't just throw money at every problem and just say, "Oh, we solved it because we just bought our way out of it." But it's clear that if you have these kind of resources for these immigrants, that the resources are there to help people who are American citizens already.
Right.
Like, where are the resources for them? They live here.
They live here.
What are we doing? What are we doing for them? This largesse that these cities are able to come up with. I don't get it. I think it's a mistake.
I agree.
I think it's a huge mistake. And in terms of, I think Sean Fader was asking about solutions. I don't know what the solution was. I mean, as bizarre as it sounds, because I'm no fan, I think Trump was on the right trajectory. You build a wall, you have laws that are followed, and you hash out wherever Congress hashes out the policy to be, you're here. If you come here and you stay 30, whatever the case may be, but there's got to be a process and procedure that everyone follows or no one follows.
Right.
So I think that's where it's going to lay. But as long as you have like these underlying economic issues, like you mentioned and Keisha mentioned, I think you're going to have that pull that like, well, we do need these workers. So I think we'll turn the other way and we'll accept all these millions of fake Social Security numbers. Now I dare you to go somewhere and use a fake Social Security number.
Right. Absolutely.
I dare you. Go somewhere and try to do some of the fake.
There'll be a treasury agent at your door.
File your taxes with a fake Social Security number.
Right.
See what happens.
Right.
Absolutely. That just can't stand. We're at it, man. We're out of time. Man, this has been fantastic.
Absolutely.
Really enjoyed the conversation as always. Thank you for everyone who tuned in, who called in. Sean Fader, William, for your comment, Keisha, for your comments. We appreciate it. But again, we're here to have a discussion.
Absolutely.
I don't care if you agree with us or not. These are issues in the public domain, that these are public policy issues. We should be able to discuss, go back and forth, agree, disagree, hash it out, and move on. So I'm satisfied with the conversation we've had. I could do it for another hour, but again, we don't have another hour, so we're good. And we'll see you next week. Possibly have any closing comments?
No, it's been great. It's been great. And listen, I'm looking forward to the discussion. We're just gonna keep it going.
Yep. Thanks. And again, thanks for watching. Good night and God bless.
God bless. See you next week.